This past spring, I was walking around the grounds of Loose Leaf Hollow, as I'm sure many of you have. I was on retreat there and with Judy Gerard. So the two of us were on retreat with Joe. And he had just had his first surgery. And so he was sort of hobbling with me as he and I were walking. But we started talking about kind of where each of us was with our lives. And I had told him that Jill had reached out to me to host in one of the Sundays, and that I was really nervous about that because of my recently diagnosed memory issues. And so I said, I'll maybe do something from the past that I know really, that I know in and out, so I can do that. And he, as only Joe could say, he looked at me and he sort of shook his head and he said, Susan, our best talks come from our current experience. Everyone loses things. And I had a moment where I thought, yeah, but losing your mind's a whole different category of losing things. But and since this all has happened with the health, I've really had to laugh about it because it in some ways it reminds me of what it was like before I got sober. So many of you know I'm in long-term recovery, but I have those moments where I say, I'm worried, I'm going to wake up and go, where did I park my car last night? Or, who's that guy sleeping next to me? I just don't know what the future is going to look like. But I have to laugh about it right now because no one knows, what the future, what things will look like in the future. But one neurologist did tell me that, Susan, you won't be writing any more books because you've lost many words. And I'm really not good with ultimatums. So I wanted to share with you some of the work I'm doing right now, and it involves Joe. One of the Sundays, he spoke to us about the hero's journey. And I think many of you were there for that. And there was just something about, as he was talking about this, and sort of in a nutshell, this idea that you leave home, you enter a dark wood, you confront a monster, you slay the monster, and you come back changed for the better. And that's an incredibly crude rendition of what that teaching was that day. But it was essentially that. And there was just something in it that really moved me. And I started writing again. And in the past, my books have been about, what I've tried to do is honor people who have taught me things. But it's tended to be around career things. Although the last book I wrote was gathering the stories of young adults in recovery, and they taught me, have continued to teach me profound things as I work with them. But so I thought this time around, what I'm going to write about, and I don't know if it's just going to be a long story or a book or what it's going to be at this point, is two spiritual teachers who have, in the last 10 years, have taught me incredible things, and one is Joe. The second one is Greg Boyle, who is the founder of Homeboy Industries, which, if you've not heard of Homeboy Industries, it's the largest gang intervention program in the world. So he and I have known each other, and he's been quite a spiritual mentor for me. In fact, he was the one who insisted that I write that last book. So those two men have been so pivotal to my inner growth that what I'm doing is with Joe is I am having weekly calls with him, which I know many of you have weekly calls. I don't. That's not what I have normally done with him, but I'm having weekly calls and I'm recording them. And each call, we're talking about a different topic. So essentially, and they're all over the board. Some are from his teachings. Many are from his teachings, but not all of them. Like a couple of weeks ago, we talked about psychopaths, which was a really interesting hour I spent with him on that topic. But if I had to wrap my head around what this is that I'm working on, it really is a story of midlife. So the sort of that point in your life where there's a stirring of something, a longing for something, but it's not easily defined. But you feel like something needs to change, but you don't know what it is. And, so what do we do in our culture? We go to fix it, right? Fix, 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 even though you don't know what it is you're fixing. And all of us know, at least in this community, we know that we can fix very few things, but what we can do is we can meditate, have quiet time, we can pray, we can gather in community like this one and share, if we're feeling moved to do that, about all of these things. So what I'm doing with Joe is, and what I'll be doing with Greg is, essentially, if you've ever read Tuesdays with Morrie, the format is, there's a young man, Mitch Albom, the author, and he asks questions to his former college teacher. And that's what this is. And so it's been enlightening, infuriating working with Joe. And I say that lovingly, because as a writer, when I write something, when I write a chapter, I'll send it to him and I'll say, sign off on this, make sure you're comfortable with it. But he'll just say, oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. Whatever it is you want to write, it's fine. And it's, as a writer, this is, I say, I'm attributing these words to you, but it's fine. So this is a man who has lost, if not 100% of his ego, most of it. So he's my role model and my hero. So what I thought I would do this morning in the time we have is read from one of the chapters, if you all are okay with that. And this is a chapter, this is actually the most recent talk he and I had, on the topic of destiny. And I can't do Joe's voice, but hopefully you'll recognize the difference. I'll try to tell you when it's Joe speaking and me speaking, okay? But just imagine you're with Joe. In this case, I was with Joe, and you're having this conversation. Okay. So I start and I say, does everyone have destiny? Let me just read it this way. Does everyone have a destiny, something that's uniquely theirs to do? And Joe says, I believe that's true. The word destiny is derived from a word meaning star. Before HBO and HGTV, he's talking about my background, the night sky was the theater, the widescreen. And the thought was there was one particular unique star for each of us. And I say, that reminds me of your story about reading Stafford's poem to the 7th graders. And he says, right. I was the only male teacher in the junior high then, and the boys would look forward to having my class because of that. But then on the first day, I'd ring the bell, read Stafford's poem, which is called A Ritual to be Read to Each Other, sit for a few minutes in silence, and the boys would look at each other and think I was nuts. So I say, read it. Okay. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. It captured the idea that there was a star for everyone. Your life wasn't meaningless. It had a destiny. It was a way for me to start the year by telling these kids, each one of you matters. Each one of you has your own destiny. And I say, I love that story. With work choices, probably a non sequitur here, but we don't see our jobs as any form of destiny. We do them. They might not even fit with our strengths or how we're made. That's why we need to know ourselves so we can have a fighting chance to love what we do. Maybe not every day, but enough days that you're fulfilled. And Joe says, yes. When we find our star, we find work that animates us. And I say, I've been spending a lot of time with college kids. That led to a commencement speech I gave to 5,000 of my closest friends, not. And there I said that we need to know our strengths, our passions, and our limits. And those limits meant for me coming to terms with having a disorder called substance use disorder that was limiting my life. Although Bill would say, Bill's my husband, Bill would say, I have another disorder, clutter disorder, that's limiting his life. Anyway, you need to know what's limiting you. And Joe says, yes, limitations are one thing the Enneagram reveals to us. And I say, I like the Enneagram so much more than Myers-Briggs, for example, because it includes our spiritual dimension of self. It's like we think we don't bring this part of us to work each morning. And Joe says, yes, well said. I've been working with the Enneagram for over 30 years to help others see the full picture of themselves. It's good to know our traits from a personality standpoint. And so much of that gets in the way of limits, living true to our authentic selves. This could express as wanting to please too much, or its opposite, acting predatory. Which connects to your first question. Do we have a destiny? Yes. Our ultimate destiny is to become our unique, authentic human self. That's a hell of a journey. It takes understanding what's getting in the way. And I say, our real self in its great and simple dignity, as Merton says. Yes, Joe says, if you have a good spiritual practice like meditation or prayer or quiet time in nature, it begins to break down your outer shell of personality. The only word I could use for my own personality for many years was tyrannical, always demanding perfection. Over the years, I've learned how to shorten up the whip. We don't want to get rid of our personality. We want to find ways to soften it into something more human, more loving, especially of ourselves. The Enneagram helps us to see what's deeper than our personalities, the part of us that connects us to others, like what you have found in 12-step recovery. I've worked with several in recovery over the years, and I wanted to understand how it worked. So I read the big book cover to cover, and I say, of course you did. And he goes on. And basically what Bill W. was saying was, until you realize there's something bigger than your ego, you stay trapped. And I say, yes. And then this next section is called New Adventures. Same topic, theme, destiny. So I say the dreamer in me likes to believe we can go off on completely new adventures in our career and that they're all a part of our destiny. I think it helps, though, to build on what's gone on before in our lives. And Joe says, well, the ultimate adventure is becoming all you're meant to be. And I say, true. You and I have had the luxury of a few birthdays, although I don't always call it a luxury. So I can look back and see that my books led me to speaking to organizations, which led me to speaking at universities, which led me to meeting college students in recovery communities, and thus my last book. And Joe says, so true. Ken Wilber has an evolutionary view of the universe. He says evolution occurs by transcending and including. You don't throw away what you've learned, you include it and then transcend it. When you read Wilber, it's all about that. And as human beings, we have the ability to realize we have an inner force, what I call soul, that can energize our work with others in the world. And it doesn't have to be everyone doing this. Margaret Mead thought the course of civilization could be changed by only 3% of people who get it. Doesn't take 51%, just a few. And I say, it's like our friend Judy Gerard. When she retired from work, she just wanted to sit on the beach. Then one thing led to another. And with her Food Network background and talent friends, she found herself building a whole school for girls from vulnerable populations. And Joe says, marvelous, isn't it? Remember what Rumi says, just keep walking. Don't walk the way fear or your self-protections want you to walk. Something's leading you to your destiny. And then we finish by talking about midlife crises. This part's called Heroes and Midlife Crises. We started talking about heroes a few months ago. I'm wondering if heroes are heroes because they take up their destiny. And Joe says, it can happen by accident, it can happen by grace. Grace isn't really understood very well, but it's built into the process of taking up our destiny. Because hard things happen, and we must believe in ourselves in those moments, but it also helps to believe in something greater than ourselves. Life will bring you into the dark wood, one way or the other. And this often happens at midlife. People have a midlife crisis, an affair, or abruptly leaving a job with no notice or plan. I think it's more a kid life crisis. You've never grown up. You've remained in that childhood operating system. The people who are running things today, who are making a mess of the world, destroying the planet, are still operating in their kid life crisis mode. I want power. I want profit. Those are their gods. We really have an incoherent culture in this way. And I say, that's why I think it's heroic that when you land in the dark wood, not to give up on yourself. There's a part in Lord of the Rings, and he and I have talked about Lord of the Rings at this point a few times. There's a part in Lord of the Rings where Frodo wants to give up on destroying the evil ring, and Sam urges him on. Even in the danger and darkness, we can't go back, he pleads, because we're fighting for the good. And all the symbolism there, because he's implying that the two of them are fighting for what's good inside of them too. And Joe says, and they kept going. They never gave up. And they saved Middle Earth. And I end by saying, Middle Earth, middle life. Maybe that was a wink from J.R.R. Tolkien. So that's one chapter. It'll probably change. That's just really a draft of it. But I hope you get a sense. What I'm trying to do is, in mentioning Joe's teaching, and I mean when he was teaching kids, stories there, in mentioning what, Rumi and Stafford, and the Enneagram, all of these things that are so fundamental to his teaching, I'm trying to capture that in these chapters. And I just want to invite, if any of you, I've captured the story about the kids in Stafford, the story about taking the guys from Houston to Yosemite, the monks, bringing the monks to Bardstown. I mean, I think I have a fair number of the stories, his stories. But if you all have other stories, I will tell you that if you send them to me, I will be overwhelmed because I know me right now. But if one of you wants to volunteer to sort of be the filter to gather these stories, I'd be grateful. Just an offer to do that if any of you would like to do that. So I think now we go into meditation. And so get into your comfortable space for doing that. And I'll lead us in with and I'll do the 15-5. So we'll meditate for 15 minutes and then I'll ring the gong and you can write for the last 5 or stay in meditation.